this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
Welcome to Blue Blogs TV.
First must play a special message.
If you want to turn your daddy parts orange, eat some Cheetos and watch some porn.
Sometimes the reality behind the spin just pops out at you when politicians open their mouths. Here are 4 such quotes on the topics of democracy, the U.S. Attorney scandal, global warming, and Iraq. Take John Bolton, please. The arch neoconservative who Bush foisted on the United Nations in a recess appointment when the Senate wouldn't approve the nomination of Bolton as ambassador. He was on The Daily Show recently, arguing with host Jon Stewart about whether Bush should pay attention to the American public's overwhelming opposition to the Iraq War and to the administration's mishandling of the occupation. Bolton said Stewart and similar critics didn't understand how democracies are supposed to work. Bush's responsibility, said Bolton, is not to the amorphous thing called the American people, but to be, quote,
true to the people who voted for him. Otherwise, what's the point of having elections? End quote.
In this, Bolton was restating the philosophy of governance that Cheney and Rove have utilized for the past 6 years. Using the logic of Machiavelli and Leo Strauss, Cheney and Rove believe that the administration should move ruthlessly and aggressively on their agenda as long as they have one more vote than the other guys, with no concessions made to those who didn't support them. I won't even go into the likelihood here that the Bush campaign stole the 2004 election. Contrast this with John F. Kennedy's statement when asked why he was not looking after the interests of those who elected him. He replied, "I was elected president of all the people." The Bush administration believed all attention should be focused on their right-wing, activist, largely fundamentalist base that put them in power. They had little need to acknowledge the opposition and instead should try to marginalize and destroy them in every which way they can in order to create the conditions for a permanent one-party rule. In short, the hard rightists do not believe in democracy, compromise, minority rights, civility, etc. That's old-school politics. Quaint, to use Alberto Gonzalez's dismissive term. Bush and company engage in smash-mouth politics, grab-it-while-you-can-take-it politics, you're with us or you're against us politics, join us or get out of our way politics. It's an authoritarian good versus evil way of viewing the world, and it has stood them in good stead until recently, aided greatly by post-9/11 fear and by a compliant stenographic mass media. So how to explain the grand change? Partly, of course, the shift came because the constant iteration of this extreme ideological perspective on the world gets old and boring, and most importantly, doesn't match reality. Also, there is Bush and Company's constant reverse Midas effect. Whatever they touch turns not to gold, but to excrement. It's difficult to even think of a positive development that has emerged from the Bush administration in the past 6 years. Rather, their list of accomplishments reveals little more than disaster, disappointment, and death. The public eventually has come to discount the administration's propaganda efforts, fed by Rove and his minions in the right-wing media machine, aided by the docile corporate newspapers and TV networks. What the Bushistas are peddling simply isn't credible anymore, at least to 2/3 of the citizenry. The hard rightists still depend on the remaining 1/3, the fundamentalist diehards, more comfortable with authoritarian leadership. But, at long last, the traditional non-fundamentalist conservatives, especially in the military, appalled by the extremists in charge of their party, have abandoned the hard-right Bush administration. And why this drastic fall-off of Bush's support? Though overly simplistic, one can offer these explanatory tags: Iraq, Katrina, corruption, incompetence, Valerie Plame, Iraq, Walter Reed, domestic spying, Pat Tillman, U.S. attorneys, Iraq, and Iraq. Did I mention Iraq? Simply put, as verified by the November 2006 election results sweeping the GOP out of congressional power, and in all the recent public opinion polls, the country has taken a national no-confidence vote on the Bush administration. They just want them to leave before more reckless damage is done. And, as recent polls demonstrate, 50% of Americans are in favor of impeachment hearings, even in the face of the agitprop doled out by the corporate media. Finally, the Democrats, in limited areas, are beginning to come alive, which is another key ingredient for change.